It was deep in the heart of the winter, in the heart of the woods, where the Wendigo roamed. Its name was whispered in fear by those who knew of its existence, for it was a creature of legend, born of hunger and desperation, with a body twisted and warped by the insatiable need for flesh. The Wendigo was said to be tall and thin, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its eyes sunken and lifeless. It had antlers that sprouted from its head, each one branching out in a tangle of bone and sinew, a cruel parody of a crown. Its arms were long and thin, like the branches of a dead tree, its fingers tipped with razor-sharp claws. Those who had seen the Wendigo said that it moved with an unnatural grace, gliding over the snow as if it were weightless. Its breath was a cold mist that hung in the air, and its voice was a chilling howl that echoed through the trees. As the sun began to set, a group of hunters stumbled upon the Wendigo's lair. They had been tracking it for days, driven by the promise of a great reward for its capture. But when they saw the creature in its full glory, they knew that they had made a terrible mistake. The Wendigo rose from its bed of bones and stared at them with its lifeless eyes. It did not move, did not speak, but the hunters could feel its hunger radiating from its body like a palpable force. They tried to run, but the Wendigo was upon them in an instant, its claws tearing through their flesh like paper. It dragged them back to its lair, where it feasted on their remains, its hunger finally sated for a time. Days passed, and the hunters were not missed. But the people of the nearby town could feel that something was wrong. There was a sense of unease in the air, a feeling that they were being watched. And then, one night, a child disappeared from their home. The parents searched the woods for hours, calling out their child's name, but they found nothing. It was only when they stumbled upon the Wendigo's lair that they realized the terrible truth. The Wendigo had taken their child, and they knew that they were next. They fled back to the town, warning the others of the danger that lurked in the woods. But it was too late. The Wendigo was already among them, its hunger growing stronger with each passing day. The people of the town tried to fight back, but the Wendigo was too powerful. It moved through the streets like a wraith, its claws tearing through anyone who stood in its way. And then, one night, the town was silent. The Wendigo had feasted on their flesh, leaving nothing but a trail of bones in its wake. As the legend of the Wendigo spread, people from all over the world began to flock to the woods, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature. Some were thrill-seekers, eager for the rush of adrenaline that came with facing such a terrifying monster. Others were researchers, hoping to unlock the secrets of the Wendigo's existence. One such researcher was Dr. Sarah Williams, a renowned expert in folklore and mythology. She had spent years studying the stories of the Wendigo, tracing their origins back to the indigenous tribes of the area. Dr. Williams arrived in the town just as the last of the Wendigo's victims were being laid to rest. She could feel the sense of unease that hung over the town like a shroud, and she knew that she was getting closer to the source of the terror. She set up her equipment in a small cabin on the edge of the woods and began her research. She combed through old documents and interviewed locals, piecing together the history of the Wendigo and the stories of those who had encountered it. As the days passed, Dr. Williams began to feel a strange sense of unease. She could hear strange noises in the woods at night, and she could feel something watching her every move. One night, as she sat in her cabin, poring over old documents, she heard a faint scratching at the door. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but then she heard it again, louder this time. She approached the door slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She peered through the peephole, but she could see nothing. And then, suddenly, the door burst open, and the Wendigo was standing before her. Dr. Williams froze, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. The Wendigo towered over her, its antlers scraping against the ceiling. It reached out with its long, thin arms, its claws poised to strike. But then, something strange happened. Dr. Williams was left alone in her cabin, trembling with fear. She knew that she had been lucky, that the Wendigo could have killed her in an instant. But she also knew that there was something strange about the creature's behavior. Over the next few days, Dr. Williams continued her research, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. And then, one night, as she was returning to her cabin, she saw something moving in the woods. At first, she thought it was the Wendigo, but as it drew closer, she realized that it was something else entirely. It was a man, dressed in furs and carrying a staff. He looked ancient, like something out of a fairy tale. The man introduced himself as the last surviving member of the indigenous tribe that had once lived in the area. He explained that he had been watching her, hoping to learn what she knew about the Wendigo. And then, he told her a story. A story about a young girl who had been taken by the Wendigo, and who had somehow managed to survive. The girl had been changed by her encounter with the creature, imbued with a strange power that allowed her to control the Wendigo's hunger. Dr. Williams listened in fascination, realizing that she had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. She asked the man where she could find the girl, and he gave her a set of directions that would lead her deep into the heart of the woods. Dr. Williams set out early the next morning, determined to find the girl and uncover the truth about the Wendigo. She followed the man's directions carefully, navigating through the dense forest until she reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small hut, made of branches and leaves. Dr. Williams approached cautiously, calling out for the girl. There was no response. She pushed open the door of the hut, and inside, she saw a figure huddled in the corner. It was the girl, and she was trembling with fear. Dr. Williams approached slowly, trying to reassure the girl that she was there to help. But as she got closer, she saw that something was wrong. The girl's eyes were black, and her skin was pale as snow. And then, the Wendigo appeared. It burst into the hut, its massive antlers tearing through the thatch roof. Dr. Williams stumbled backwards, her heart racing. She knew that she was no match for the monster. But then, something strange happened. The girl stood up, and as she did, her eyes began to glow with an otherworldly light. She raised her arms, and the Wendigo hesitated, as if it were caught in some kind of trance. Dr. Williams watched in amazement as the girl spoke, her words echoing through the hut like thunder. And then, slowly, the Wendigo began to shrink, its massive body collapsing in on itself until it was nothing more than a pile of bones. The girl collapsed, exhausted from the effort. Dr. Williams rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. Together, they stumbled out of the hut and into the bright sunlight. As they emerged from the clearing, they saw that the forest was alive with activity. People had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They looked at Dr. Williams and the girl in wonder, realizing that they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. And then, as suddenly as it had all begun, it was over. The girl disappeared back into the woods, and Dr. Williams was left alone, standing at the edge of the clearing. As she looked back at the hut, she knew that she had seen something that few people would ever believe. She had witnessed the power of the Wendigo, and she had seen that it could be defeated. And yet, even as she thought about the monster's defeat, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike again. Dr. Williams couldn't shake off the feeling that the Wendigo was still out there, waiting. She had defeated it once, but she knew that it was only a matter of time before it returned. Over the next few days, Dr. Williams tried to gather as much information as she could about the Wendigo. She scoured through books and online articles, trying to uncover any information that could help her understand the monster and its motives. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. As Dr. Williams dug deeper, she found accounts of Wendigo sightings all over the world. Some claimed to have seen it in the forests of Canada, while others reported sightings in the remote wilderness of Alaska. But one thing was clear: the Wendigo was real, and it was dangerous. Dr. Williams knew that she needed to find a way to stop the monster once and for all. She decided to return to the forest, hoping to find the girl who had defeated the Wendigo with her powers. She searched for days, following the same path she had taken before. But this time, the forest was different. It was darker, colder, and more foreboding. She could hear the rustling of leaves and the snap of twigs underfoot, and she knew that the Wendigo was close. And then, she saw it. The monster was massive, its antlers reaching towards the sky. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its breath was a cloud of mist in the cold air. Dr. Williams tried to run, but the Wendigo was too fast. It caught her in its massive jaws, its teeth sinking into her flesh. She screamed, but no one heard her. The Wendigo dragged her deeper into the forest, to a place where no one could find her. As she lay there, bleeding and broken, Dr. Williams knew that she had failed. She had tried to stop the Wendigo, but in the end, it had claimed her as its prey. And yet, even as she lay there dying, she couldn't help but wonder if the girl with the glowing eyes was still out there. She hoped that someone would be able to stop the monster before it claimed any more lives. As Dr. Williams slipped away, she knew that the legend of the Wendigo would live on. It was a creature of darkness, a monster that defied explanation. And it was something that she would never forget.